This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 141. And tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Hi.
Godra.
Howdy.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
We are time travelers.
Yep. We have somehow skipped a full week ahead in a matter of 10 minutes.
Several of us are at Axe Out.
Yes, I can be in two places at once. It's amazing. Like as alluded by Tam, we're doing a double episode this week, and this is part 2 of our Games of the Year show for the year of 2016.
For the confused, we did a double episode last week, and you're hearing it now.
Yeah. And we've done this 3 years in a row, or this was the third year that we've done this to cover the absence of Ashgar and I at PAX South, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only reason why we do it this is because I'm the one that records and I'm the one that edits. And if I'm gone, so far I have yet to train an understudy in actually producing and uploading a podcast. Not that it's a difficult thing to do, but you know.
Look, you're the media personality. Sometimes that comes with a price.
Man. This year is very much not me being a media personality. I don't have
the one
much.
Everyone tunes in for.
No. It's Grace. I'm pretty sure it's Grace.
It's really doubt that.
All of the Bell t-shirts and plushies say otherwise.
God. I'm scared to know if there's an actual Bell plushie.
There could be.
Needs to be.
Anyway, embarrassment of Bell aside, they're going to get kicking on the next list. And we actually made decent time on the first list, so we'll see if we can do the same this time. First title. Right. What? Have I cursed it now? Anyway, first title on the list is Pokemon Go. I know I put this on the list, and there were 2 other people that put this on the list.
I put this on my list.
Also on my list.
I feel like for me, like I have kind of a fraught relationship with Pokemon Go because like I can't play it anymore. Because once upon a time, I rooted my phone and then unrooted it, and the Google safety check says I still have it rooted, so I can't play the game anymore. But this game, I feel like, is really important because it did something that no other game had quite done, at least not in the same way. This was more cultural phenomenon than game in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's definitely, like, even though I enjoyed everything about this game, I feel like it is important to recognize that especially because this was our first really successful foray into augmented reality. And even though it stands on everything they did with Ingress was never anywhere near this popular and just didn't work as well as Pokemon Go did.
So yeah, Pokemon Go was just such a complete cultural phenomenon that we would be completely remiss if we didn't have it on this list, regardless of whether it's actually successful as a game. But I mean, I played the heck out of it. I think everyone kind of did when we could, because the servers were so overloaded that half the time you couldn't even get on.
Yeah.
It was just so massively successful.
I mean, I was going out at lunch and going to parks, and, you know, like, I had this weird route to work where I would stop in a number of parking lots that were, you know, had Pokemon that I'd gotten in the past, and, like, I really varied my schedule to you know, play this game.
Yeah, I spent hours in one of the nearby parks, and it was always packed.
I was walking around my neighborhood and like getting to know small children because they would recognize when someone else was playing. Like that was kind of part of the fun, right? Like this weird, even though I'm a huge introvert, like it was this little social thing and you could instantly tell by looking if someone was playing the game.
Oh yeah, it was obvious. Like there were certain motions that you would never make on a phone otherwise. And like I had this situation where I was walking around my neighborhood and like I saw somebody that was obviously playing and they looked up and they saw that I was playing and we kind of just held up our phones as, you know, it kind of chuckled and then walked over to each other and started talking about like I caught this in the neighborhood, or you know, I caught this over here, so you might check over here. And like I don't know who this person is, and I've never seen them since, but it was like this instant moment of connection over a game that I've not really experienced since maybe like the arcade days of playing Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, where people were instant friends by playing that game.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the thing that makes it get onto my list, is it represents a type of gaming that I haven't seen in like decades.
Yeah.
So it's not on my list, but I mean, there were some moments of playing this game, like you and I, Tam, with 500 people all crowding around a tree because a Blastoise just showed up.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And like everyone's celebrating this awesome rare find.
Well, and like I am super jealous of the folks that are going to be able to play next weekend, because supposedly there's some Pokemon Go live event happening at PAX South.
Wait, aren't you going to be there?
I can't play anymore.
Can't play.
Oh.
Yeah.
It does not work on my phone. The only way for it to work on my phone is to root my phone and run masking software that would hide the fact that it's rooted.
No, what you should do is you should install BlueStacks on your laptop. Take your laptop with you and install an Android emulator on BlueStacks on that, and then put Pokemon Go on that. Play it on your laptop.
I have absolutely played on BlueStacks before. I'm just saying. But like I played on a different account because like I didn't want to do anything questionable on my main account. But I absolutely used one of the alternate distributions to scout around and see if stuff was spawning in areas that I thought it was. But I guess like I'm really hoping that someone takes what was ultimately like a really cool tech demo and turns it into a much more interesting game.
I'd like to point out that this interesting tech demo is making a lot of money.
Oh, it is! Like, I'm not saying like, calling it a tech demo is in no way making it less valid, but it is doing something that nobody has quite done other than Ingress.
I do agree that it is somewhat lacking in terms of game.
Yeah, but you know, people are still playing, and I mean, I find it really funny. Like every once in a while, like some of my coworkers' kids come in, and I will overhear them, and they are totally still playing Pokemon Go constantly.
There's a contingent, the Seattle local contingent, that chat. There's a Discord specifically for it, and it's still very active. I mean, it's not like overwhelmingly active the way it was earlier, but
yeah, like here they had like Pokemon bar crawls where like you would start at one bar and like everybody would go together as a group, and just the fact that they had like 30-40 people roaming around would guarantee that a significant number of Pokemon would spawn.
they tried to do that here, and it was a disaster because there were too many people.
Yeah, I think a town like Tulsa was probably the upper bound of where it would work well, because probably about 50 is the most you could realistically get that to work with and still not overwhelm the bars.
Yeah. Here they had team-specific crawls because they had to limit it somehow.
Man, the red versus blue rivalry was serious.
Poor Team Instinct.
Yep.
I still have a shirt, my favorite shirt. It's a red shirt with a picture of an Articuno with an Articuno silhouette and Team Instinct written on it. It's fantastic.
The only thing I didn't like was that getting into it even 7 days late, enough so that I couldn't really compete for any of the local gyms. At this point, because I haven't been playing nonstop, I still can't compete for any of the local gyms.
Yeah.
Hey, I started playing the second day, and I could never compete for any of the local gyms, so, you know.
I live in a really rural place, and, I have to go driving around way out of my way to places to even find a local gym. So I never actually utilized that whole piece of the game, and I still loved it.
I honestly didn't find that piece of the game like all that compelling.
That's the thing. Like, it means it doesn't have the things I like in a normal Pokemon game. Still has lots of cool parts.
We had a lot of
the battling, the trading. None of that is there.
I feel like it could be, which I think is weird. But I also think that it's sort of the first try at this kind of thing. And I'm interested to see what else we do with AR, because I'm really excited about AR gaming.
I feel like a dungeon crawl game would be amazing.
Maybe. I feel like a lot of these things are technical problems with server load.
Yeah. I mean, that was absolutely a thing. Like, it took a long time for us to reach a point where the servers were just not melting constantly. And it was hard because, like, there were a couple times where... See, my wife was, like, super cool about this. Like, she was willing to plan day trips for me to go places to find interesting stuff. And, like, the one time we tried it, by the time I drove the 35 minutes, 40 minutes to where we were going, the servers were melting. Like, it was non-functional. So that kind of killed my desire to do that too often.
Yeah.
Because I never really had any guarantee that when we got there, I would actually be able to do anything. But all of this said, like, because I can't play it, I miss the hell out of it. Like, I wish I could play it. I would still be playing it regularly.
Maybe next time you get a new phone.
Absolutely. And that is, like, I can't tell you how often I have, stalked what the current price of a Google Pixel is. Okay, let's move on. This is absolutely a Coder pick. Dark Souls 3.
So, yeah, this is definitely a me pick. This was the year that I started playing From Software games pretty seriously. I think it started with us playing Bloodborne on the couch, Tam.
Sure.
Well, I think this year of me playing.
Yeah. This is a series I've been trying to get you into for, like, now.
I realize.
This is the year that it finally worked.
It finally worked. And we didn't really get very far in that, but I went home and I loaded up Dark Souls 1, and I played all the way through that and beat that game. And I thought Dark Souls 1 was amazing, and I loved it so much. And it, like, as soon as I beat it was right when Dark Souls 3 was coming out. And so I started playing through that using a little bit different tactics. Like, I went with a more heavy mage focus, and that was really fun until I ran into a boss that just I was not a proper build for. And I came back to it recently and restarted it as a more traditional, just heavy weapon, and I'm currently playing through with a giant two-handed club, and playing a Dark Souls game without a shield is a lot of fun. These games actually have a lot of different play styles that you can pick up. And I've gotten to see a lot of them, and it's also been fun just watching my progress as a gamer in these games. Coming from when we were playing Bloodborne and I was dying constantly. Like, if there were a pack of 3 enemies at once, it was 50-50 odds of whether I lived or died. I picked up my own copy of Bloodborne for Christmas, and I went in and accidentally one-shot Cleric Beast, because I've just gotten better at these games. I know the tells, I know the feel of the game. Like, I am better at these games, and I can very visibly witness that fact.
Yeah, I mean, when we were playing Bloodborne, you'd see me intentionally get into fights, and you're like, you're crazy, you're gonna die. And it wouldn't, most of the time I wouldn't. Sometimes I would.
I mean, when you were fighting the big guy with the axe, you died a lot.
Yeah.
AKA the guy I tried to tackle immediately?
Yes.
Yeah. But I did beat him.
Eventually, yes, you eventually beat him.
I feel like the answer to that guy is probably level up my gear.
There are some tricks. Like, I also ran into that guy and was surprised when I also one-shot him. But again, I've spent a lot of time this year playing these games, and Dark Souls 3 in particular it's really good. It's got a lot of interesting... I mean, all of the Dark Souls games have this story that they are telling under the surface. And you are interacting with a lot more of the characters in Dark Souls 3 in the Firelink Shrine. So it's doing, I think, a better job of telling the story. I think Dark Souls 1, I know people who really love it, especially for the story, but I think it does not do a good job of conveying the story. And Dark Souls 3 has you constantly going back to Firelink Shrine, and all of the characters are there, and like they have slightly different dialogue to talk to you about, and it's very interesting. And also very bleak, because it's a Dark Souls game.
Something grim dark future. Except for not future.
It's 10 out of 10.
It's a gothic horror game. A gothic horror adventure game.
I mean, the main thing I'm aware of about Dark Souls is that one of the bosses is a sad puppy, and you have to kill the sad puppy.
Oh god. Sif is such a good dog. And
Sif is a giant wolf, but Sif is,
Sif is such a good dog. He's just staying there at his master's grave, watching over it. And so you have to kill him, because he's such a good dog. And it is heartbreaking, because unlike some of the other bosses where as you fight them, like, as they get weaker, they frenzy and it becomes harder, like, Sif starts limping around as his HP starts dropping.
I'm not sure I could do that.
Oh, it's brutal.
I think I love animals too much to do that.
Yeah, my friend described that to me, and I was like, I don't know if I could do that. That's too sad.
Like, what do you get for doing this thing?
I'm pretty sure Sif is one of the required bosses to beat the game, actually.
Yep.
They just hate life.
I haven't run into anything that bleak in Dark Souls 3 yet.
I saw some gameplay of, like, the snow area, and that looked cool.
Oh my gosh, that's where I am right now. Oh, it was also very funny. So I'm playing the snow area, and as you enter the snow area, the first thing you see is a very long bridge. And I've now played enough games by From Software to know that that's a trap.
Yeah, that seems like an absolute trap.
And sure enough, a giant monster comes up from behind it, and I'm like, okay, nope, I'm just gonna kill this stupid monster now. So I should also point out some other things about Dark Souls 3. I've talked a lot about Dark Souls and From Software and Bloodborne. I think Dark Souls 3 also has some things that it's doing that sets it apart. It doesn't necessarily message this super well, but it kind of does have a good way to start the game, because in most From Software games, you're needing to pour points into some offensive attributes so that you can do good damage. In Dark Souls 3, there are weapons that do not scale with any attribute whatsoever. They just do, like, naturally a lot of damage. They don't scale well into the end game. But this allows you to...
Dark Souls 1 did have some of these, including one you can get very, very, very early if you are patient.
Oh, interesting. I did not realize this. But what it lets you do is really focus early game on getting your survivability up, which is a huge boon. Because survivability does a lot to make that game a little bit less punishing. I know a lot of people talk about these series in terms of how hard they are, like they're tough but fair, and they are that, but I don't think that's that was not the selling point for me. The selling point for me was just these games are really fun, and they let me play a whole bunch of different styles, and like there are a lot of interesting puzzles to solve, but as soon as I've started to solve them for myself, I am suddenly that much better at the game, and each death I'm learning something. I don't I don't want people to get scared off from these games because everyone describes them as incredibly, incredibly hard.
The thing, yeah, like, so I've warred with all these different ways of selling Souls games. One way I've seen them sold is, do you like the MMO raid experience? This is a single player game that scratches that itch. It's a game where you can get more powerful and you can also get more skilled, and you'll notice yourself getting more skilled. But like one of the best like definitions of fun I've ever seen is invokes the fact that our brains enjoy overcoming challenges, and you've got to hit a certain like your challenges have to be overcomeable. And I feel like Dark Souls is really good at giving you obstacles to overcome that you can overcome. You just sometimes have to think about it. They are hard, but you will also be good enough to rise to it.
I also think it's got just the other thing they are very good at is showing you beautiful shots of this world. Like, this is an interconnected world that you are exploring throughout the course of the game, and they are very good at making it so as you are walking through the world, you will just happen across these beautiful vistas of this haunted, lonely world that you are adventuring through.
And they have spent all of their time on the world and none of them on the character models.
Oh, no.
But anyway, okay, we're probably running a little long on Dark Souls. But yeah, I am even starting to work my way through Bloodborne, which, is Soulsy and am enjoying myself so far. So well worth checking out. So the next game on the list is once again in a category of almost cultural phenomenon, but Overwatch. And I know I put it on the list, and I think a couple other people put it on the list.
Just you.
Just me. So Overwatch itself is a really good game. It's not a game that I particularly play that often, but I think...
Since I think I've played more Overwatch than anybody else here.
Yep.
let me hop in on the game part. Overwatch in Team Fortress 2, way more accessible, I think way more fun. It's Blizzard taking the team shooter and making it an accessible, entertaining experience, and it works really well. Like, playing Overwatch with friends is great, and the mechanics are simple enough that I don't get into games where I feel like I just get rolled, and like I always used to in Team Fortress 2. And like running around as a group with friends is some of the most fun gaming I've had all year. I don't even normally like team shooters. They're usually my least favorite kind of game, other than like, I don't know, Madden. But like Overwatch is really fun. It's just a quick it's fun to hop in. I play for like 30 minutes to an hour, 2 or 3 matches, and try a couple of different characters, and I feel pretty good about it. And if, unlike a game like League of Legends or other like select a character and play them games, I don't have selection regret. I don't have that bit where, oh, if I picked this other character, we could be...
Because you can always change.
Yeah, and it makes such a huge difference for something like a team shooter. Like, oh, they know all of my... in Team Fortress 2, it would be like, oh, they figured out all of my tricks as a spy. Like, well, now I'm useless to the team until we go to the next map and I can play a different character. But with this, it's like, oh, they have a comp that really shuts down me playing Pharah. Okay, I'll switch to Genji. I'll switch to somebody else. And it makes it so much more dynamic and flexible that I never feel like a game is unwinnable.
So, you mentioned League of Legends, and that's actually kind of apt because, much like League of Legends, I care way more about the Overwatch setting and the characters, and I'm more interested in the dynamics of how they interrelate than I actually am in the game. And maybe that makes for weird choice for, a Games of the Year show, but like, I have been so interested this year watching this game roll out new characters and new story that isn't actually directly involved with the gameplay itself. And even more so than that, it has been super interesting watching the community being super passionate about the characters.
Yeah.
The characters are very well characterized.
They're super charming, and they feel so different in a lot of cases. I mean, I played a lot with Ammo, and Ammo is probably like one of the least competitive shootery type gamers I know, but she's really into it, and a lot of it is on the strengths of the characters.
She has drawn so many of these characters, and they're all great. Like,
Yeah.
she is super into Soldier 76. Is it 76?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. AKA my birth year. But yeah, like, it's great, and like, it's been so weird to have a clinical distance from the romantic aspect of this game and watch the ships happening and the extreme like anger that is spawned over Blizzard coming through and like making Genji and Mercy a thing instead of Far Mercy, the ship that a lot of people like. It's basically at a level of cultural phenomenon. And I have seen people get into this game that I wouldn't normally associate with this game. Like Tam said, like non-competitive players are like all of a sudden into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I would if I still had a group that was running every night like we did for a while, I would hop in and play at least a little bit every night. Like even if it was just one game, it was super fun. Hop in, have a good time. Okay, that was cool. How to do something else.
The time I played the most recently was during the Halloween event, where it completely changed the way the game worked. And I hope that they put it in a game mode like that, where it was a completely PvE game mode.
Yeah,
where it basically was tower defense, for lack of a better term. And there were bosses, and there were like levels of waves that you were trying to get through, and you're basically trying to hold out as long as you could. And it was really fun because it basically did what I always wanted League to do, was give me some interesting single player PvE type mode where I got to play the champions. So I'd like to see them do a lot more of that. I mean, and they've done that several times where they basically mutate the game with an event. Like you had Lucio Ball, which was basically Rocket League.
That was incredibly fun.
Yeah.
Like, incredibly silly, but incredibly fun.
Okay, time to move on. Stardew Valley. Whose pick was that? Actually, it was a lot of people's pick.
Yes.
It was one of mine.
I mean, I don't even know where to start with this game, other than, like, the untold number of hours of my life that disappeared without even me noticing that any time had passed. I mean, this game is just, like, incredibly charming, incredibly, adorable characters, fun gameplay, like varied things to do, and somehow it's this tiny indie game that became a gigantic success.
This game's had so many different systems, and all of them were different, and I could do what I wanted and mostly still be making progress towards things. If I got bored of one, it was fine. I would just let that sit for a little bit, and I'd go solve some other problem. But it also had such interesting, varied characters. Like, there were a lot of different characters going on there, and they were all very different and well realized, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of, like, why it was worthwhile to build myself up and make progress in the game wasn't just so that I could have a really sweet ass farm, but it was because like I could talk to all these people in the town and find out things about their little stories and their lives, and like get to know everybody, and everyone was really different and had an interesting story to tell.
Yeah, it's incredibly charming. There's so many different interesting things to do. And they're unlike other games that I've played in this sort of genre, it gives you enough time before stuff becomes time sensitive. Because you do hit a point where some things are time sensitive, but it takes long enough that the game lets you sort of figure out what you're doing and get your feet under you and so on before it actually matters.
Yeah, I mean, I am not a veteran of this genre of game by any stretch, and I didn't have a whole lot of trouble sort of keeping myself balanced and keeping up with things I needed to do once things became time sensitive. And it was just, I mean, it's just incredibly fun. The music was cute, the graphics were cute, the systems were interesting and fun. I mean, we were talking before the show about whether we were going to try to like come to any consensus or rank anything in terms of our games of the year, but like if I had to pick one game that was my game of the year, it would be Stardew Valley. Like it encompassed a lot of different fun things to do, and I just really, really enjoyed it.
This was a good year for games with fishing mini games. Because I normally hate fishing mini games, but I really, really like the Stardew Valley fishing game.
It frustrated me at first, but then it grew on me, and by the end, I actually really enjoyed it.
There was the mix of like you can level up your stuff, and there's also definitely a skill to it, and like as I would fish in a spot, I would start to get a feel, ooh, this certainly doesn't feel like a regular old fish. This is probably something good. I'd better pay extra special attention to make sure I can reel this sucker in. I did not actually get all the way to the end of this game, but I did manage to catch myself one of the legendary fish, and that was really fun.
Yeah. I was a few months away from hitting like the end of the game, and I need to go back and do that. Like the you get judged and have completed the big extra building and so on and so forth.
Yep.
The only issue I had with it was that I automated myself out of a job.
I mean, that's what the cave is for, right?
Yeah, but I also beat the cave.
Okay. I thought you could have to beat multiple caves.
Yes.
Fair enough.
So I lived a life of leisure, and a life of leisure was not as interesting as I hoped.
I mean, that would probably give me more time to go around and talk to all of the people that I largely ignored because I was trying to work on my farm.
I tried to be balanced, and I ended up like making friends with a reasonable number of the townsfolk while also trying to progress through everything else there was to do in the game. So I did get to the point where I could get married and all of that, so that was fun.
Yeah.
So we go from Stardew Valley, which was a major time eater, to yet another major time eater in the form of Stellaris.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that happened.
Yes.
Can I just say how surprised I am that it's on this many people's lists and not mine?
It's also not on mine, so this was a real popular game, huh?
Yes.
A little bit.
Like this is one of the few games that came out this year that I actually bought this year because it's a Paradox game, and I already know that I love Paradox games, and it's space exploration, and yes, sign me up.
I love, it's basically a 4X game.
Yep.
I love 4X games. I can never get anybody to play them with, or very rarely can I play them with Stellaris.
Someone who generally speaking, does not like 4X games, I got very into Stellaris anyway. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. Well, I have a pretty good idea why that is. Because the 4X stuff sort of barely matters. Like, yes, it's cool, you can go out and conquer the galaxy. They eventually give you, an actual victory condition. But it really is about the journey.
Yeah. And in fact, I've never actually made it to a victory condition because eventually, I've taken over enough of the galaxy, or it would be so difficult and so complicated to move, to do more, and I'll just start over with a different alien race and try something else.
Yeah.
It's like I got as far as I, can and be entertained with the communist science lizards. Now I'll, try the Scientology birds.
Did I tell you guys my story against the Unbidden? So I was playing Stellaris, and like you do in Stellaris, you see who your nearby neighbors are and decide whether you're going to be rivals or allies. And there was a group to the south who were totally chill, absolutely willing to be friends. So I was like, sure, whatever. If you don't start anything with me, I won't start anything with you. I'm mostly not going to pay any attention to you because I'm going to try and expand all around like I do in these games. And they mostly stayed cool with me for a very, very long time. They never broke treaty with me. Whenever we joined a federation, they always joined my federation. They were absolutely best friends with me. And I mostly didn't think about them because they were much smaller than me. And then the Unbidden invaded, which is one of those mid to late game events where something happens that upends the galaxy in a very stark way. With the Unbidden, you have these massive fleets that just start taking over all of these systems and spreading out, and they're like way more powerful than you should probably have at that point in the game. And everyone was joining federations to try and kill them. And I was like, well, whatever. I'm not going to rely on any stupid AI. I can do this on my own. I built up a fleet that would be roughly the size of theirs. I go in and I attack, and I discover they have shields that are so good that I can't actually do any damage to them.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is one of those, this is a problem. But because I have these allies who I have never paid any attention to for the entire game, they send in this tiny little 5K fleet that has shield penetrating weapons. They just ignore shields and go straight to hull. So we have this epic firefight where I am trying to shield this tiny ship as they dismantle the Unbidden fleet. And every single one of my allies died, but we managed to close off the warp gate and drive the Unbidden out, and that is one of the coolest stories in a video game I've had in years.
Yeah, and that's so much of why I love this game, and why I love other Paradox games too, is because they are story creation engines.
Yeah. It's what I love about games like Crusader games.
Yeah.
And my only regret with Stellaris is that I never got to the point where I played with a group of other people. So I was mostly kind of doing my own thing. And I saw and heard you guys when you were playing some games together. It sounded like a lot of fun.
We can make this happen.
Yeah, I think I hadn't picked it up yet when you were doing that.
It's not too late. We can make it happen.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I mean, what's the upper limit? Is there an upper limit to players in that game?
Something like 32.
Did you want to do it? Because we could do it. We could do it.
I think this is a good idea.
And that was honestly the most fun I had with Stellaris, was playing with other people. I do need to play it. It's had a bunch of content go in since I played it last.
Yes.
And I don't know if that will change how I feel about it. I kind of felt like I figured it out.
It
does
mostly
address some of that.
Yeah, they've addressed some of that. It adds more interesting story things to find, and
main writer of Fallen London contributed an event. Jane.
Yes, I found that event, It starts when a black hole starts calling one of your scientists by name. Later, it starts writing love poetry to one of your scientists. It goes from there. It's incredibly creepy.
Sounds like all in London.
That was my favorite. That was some of my favorite stuff in the game, were the little like unlockable, findable stories. And
Yeah.
I'm excited that they may have added more of those, because I always felt like there was a point. I would get to a point in the game where those just stopped happening.
Yeah, but one of my main complaint about the game is that there's not enough of those yet. And knowing Paradox, they will continue adding those as they patch the game into perpetuity, because that's how they roll.
I mean, doesn't Crusader Kings still see new content?
Yes, it does.
It does.
There are something like 10 DLC packages for it at this point, possibly more. There's a lot, and each one adds a lot of stuff. So yeah, I mean, just based on what we've seen about what's coming in the next patch from the dev diary so far, like there's a lot of cool stuff coming in it. I mean, actual victory conditions are coming in the next patch. Victory conditions that aren't take over the entire galaxy.
I did that. And I think it burned me out.
Yeah, like you can choose the victory condition to like turn into robot people and ascend.
Sold.
Or develop super psychic powers, and so forth.
Not as cool as robot bodies.
Also, the most recent dev diary, apparently there's going to be a lot more fine control over the slavery system and the purge systems. So like you can determine precisely how you enslave and or how you purge various races on a race by race basis. So you can absolutely decide that one race you found would make a delicious dinner and raise them as livestock.
Wow.
That got dark quick.
Story generation engine.
Yeah, that's definitely what
Yep.
that's definitely what I expect from Stellaris, I'll be totally honest.
Yes, historically they will give you all the tools you need to be as good or as bad as you want. And every playstyle is valid.
So, another game that kind of came from out of nowhere, Tyranny, literally came from out of nowhere. We didn't know it was being released.
Well, I mean, Ash did.
And I'm the only one.
I had been getting.
Awful.
I think I'd gotten some messages because I contributed to the Kickstarter and was like, "Oh, that's a thing that's happening. That looks interesting." But yeah, I had no idea when it actually came out.
Timing, it came out the day after Election Day, so nobody knew. But yeah, Tyranny. Tyranny is an RPG from Obsidian in the same sort of vein as Pillars of Eternity, on the same engine, in fact.
It's the first Obsidian game that I've played all the way through that I feel like they had the budget to actually finish.
They had the budget to finish Pillars of Eternity. I just haven't played it all the way through.
Oh, well, that's why I used the words that I did. God, I'm hesitant to like say a whole lot about Tyranny because spoilers, it's going to be a game of the month coming up here at some point soon. But like,
User in your channel timed out.
It's a game in which I have all kinds of choices, and they're all interesting. And the game judges you, but judges you regardless of your choices. So like the basic concept is Sauron wins. Sauron has won. Is basically just cleaning up, and you are like a legal who works underneath him. You're the person who goes out and lets people know that, you know, the Dark Lord is pleased or displeased and what the Dark Lord's orders are. You're responsible for upholding the Dark Lord's law. And so, like, that's the basis of the game. And it starts with this really cool kind of lengthy opening bit that...
In a completely different style.
In a completely different style. That's like, here's your rise to power. And so you make a whole bunch of interesting choices just straight off the bat.
User entered your channel.
That go through all of the stuff that happened before the game proper began. And based on those things, the world interacts with you vastly differently. Like, all of them are valid choices. There's no like right or wrong answers, but the game plays out very differently based on what your choices were here. There's different interesting factions. It's one of the RPGs with the most replayability that I've seen anywhere. I normally find RPGs to not be super replayable, just because I already know most of the story, and it's just the little details that I don't know. But like in this one, I am pretty sure that I have a completely different play experience than like anybody else I know who's played it.
Well, I'm super shocked at how much that little bitty intro has really led to strict changes in the game.
Yeah. It's kind of like I can think of a lot of RPGs where a lot of like story-based RPGs where there are big decision points that make a big difference, but they usually come fairly deep into the game. So you've got to play for a while before the effects of your choices are even notable or meaningful in any reasonable way. And so it's really interesting to see this game that does it so differently and gives you those interesting choices right off the bat.
It honestly kind of reminds me of Planescape Torment in a way, because like it was so like Planescape Torment was so vastly different than Baldur's Gate, and this game is the same kind of different from the traditional Obsidian fare.
Yeah.
There is one specific thing this game does that I wish every RPG of this style would do going forward. I know they won't, but whatever. When you are introduced to a term or something in a line of dialogue that the game does expect you to know, it is basically hyperlinked.
Yes.
And you can right-click it and see exactly what that thing is.
It's brilliant. It's not just exactly what that thing is, but in a lot of cases, how it relates to you personally.
I also use this for some elements of playing with the fourth wall, in that there's a character you meet early that dialogue is highlighted in this way, and if you right-click on it, you get other interesting things rather than what he just said.
I think more than anything, I really just like the world that this is set in, even though like I am basically the opposite side that I normally play in games. I like the world building.
Yeah. There's interesting stuff and there's interesting people, and playing an agent of the Dark Lord is interesting and nuanced. Like, it's really well thought out, and they have...
I like how it's not just kicking puppies, basically.
Yeah.
Neverwinter Nights, if you are not a good character, the options available to you are kick puppies and eat babies.
Yeah. It doesn't moralize the way like Mass Effect or KOTOR or Neverwinter Nights does. It has this sort of like non-judgmental morality of Dragon Age that I think is what makes Dragon Age's storytelling so interesting. Like I've talked in other podcasts about how I'm really uninspired by games in which that purport to be like the space between good and evil, but then being evil is sort of dumb and being good has no cost. So it's just
being
like,
evil is the wrong choice, even
like,
though you're supposed to be able to be both.
Yeah, like being evil is just the wrong choice, and like being good is just the default. Like it's what is expected. And like Mass Effect plays with this a little bit, but it's still very like red versus blue, light versus dark. But this, I run into multiple choices where, and I had the same experience in Dragon Age, where here is a choice, and I could not tell you what the good and evil options are. They're certainly, and it's not because they're not meaningful, but it depends on quite a few things. How do I feel about this situation? How do I feel about these characters? Who do I think is right? Like, here's a difference of opinions, and which opinion do I think is more valid, or do I think is right? And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in this game that I think is really interesting. Like, I think it's very reasonable to have a takeaway that, like, actually the life under the Dark Lord isn't that bad for most people. Like, it's certainly better than not, at least from what you can see.
Yeah, and the thing is like, other than the fact that there's a massive military presence, the towns seem to function like towns would normally function. Like, it is not as bleak as I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Being a game about the bad guys.
About that, well, you can make some decisions.
Yeah, well, and that's what's really neat about it, is that depending on the choices you make, it can be very bleak, or it doesn't have to be. Because you're in a position of a lot of authority, and the way you interpret that authority is really meaningful. It's also got a fairly accessible but still nuanced and interesting combat system with spellcrafting and other fun toys.
It's probably not as tactical as like Pillars of Eternity is trying to be.
No, and I think that's to its credit. It's a game. It's a party-based...
It's not really about that.
Yeah, it's a party-based isometric RPG that I can play completely in real-time combat mode, like action-y combat mode, and not feel like I lost anything. Like, I didn't have to auto-pause it every 2 seconds. But yeah, like Ash said, it's not really about that. It's there, and it's interesting. It's not about that.
But we don't want to necessarily get into the story elements of the game because, like we said earlier, it's probably going to very shortly end up being a game of the month.
Yeah.
So, we will move on. Final Fantasy 15. This is a game that I wasn't sure if I would like.
This is my pick.
10 years
a game a lot of people weren't sure if they would like.
I wasn't sure if I would like.
I mean, it's boy band road trip simulator.
Yeah.
It's
this
another
is a year
game
for a lot of games who've been in development for a long time to come out and not actually suck.
Yeah, that too.
It is another game with a fishing minigame I actually like.
This may be the best fishing minigame I've experienced, in all honesty. Certainly the closest to actual fishing.
I think I still like Stardew Valley better, but I
think I like Stardew Valley's fishing better, but I haven't done a huge amount of it yet in Final Fantasy 15, so maybe I'll change my mind.
Yeah, to tell you how good I think this game is. Today is the first day that I've played it with to any great degree. Like, I played through the tutorial previously and then had to go do something else. Today I played through the entire first chapter, and I absolutely see why everybody has been raving about it, and yes.
Story time. I was a rabid Final Fantasy fan. Starting with 7, working my way backwards to 6, then through 8 and 9, and then other previous ones when I could get my hands on them. They have always been uneven, quirky, but capable of kind of awkward, terrible lows, but also incredibly inspiring highs.
Yeah, up to now, even the best Final Fantasy had its noticeable flaws.
Yeah, and there isn't a single Final Fantasy that I can't point to deep, blatant flaws as well as great, awesome up moments. And notably, I kind of fell out of love with the series playing 10 for sort of unrelated to the game reasons. Playing 10 was like playing a game where the protagonist was one of the people who bullied me in high school. So I checked out of that pretty quick. Because you play as, sports bro.
Yeah.
I'm recently coming back to it and enjoying it more. But I sort of checked out of the series then. I played a whole bunch of Final Fantasy XI, but that wasn't really like a Final Fantasy. And then 12 and 13 just didn't grab me. I couldn't get past the flaws to get to the good parts, which in the case of 13 seems to require that you get to the second game before it gets good.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
And it wasn't for lack of trying. I just couldn't do it. And so and I love Final Fantasy 14, but again, it's not really. It is a Final Fantasy game in a lot of ways, but it's not really what I think of one when I think of I'm going to play a Final Fantasy game. And I'd sort of resigned myself to I'm maybe just not interested in Final Fantasy anymore. That's a thing that happens. Some of my favorite series, like Baldur's Gate, I loved, but I'm not about to go play that again anytime soon. And have tried, and it didn't work. And so Final Fantasy 15 for me was, all right, we're going to give the series one more shot. This is them trying to resurrect the series and get back to where it once was. I'll give it another shot. If this is bad, I'm probably done with Final Fantasy games. I can rest easy knowing that I think that they're probably not for me anymore. Needless to say, this is easily my game of the year, and whenever they decide to tell me that there's something to pre-order that's another Final Fantasy game, I'm going to be right on top of it.
I'm kind of in a similar position. Basically, I was resigned to thinking that the best days of Final Fantasy were long in the past, and when I mean long in the past is I didn't like 10, I didn't like 13. I liked 11 or 12 enough, but I mean, like, it wasn't really anything to write home about. Like, it was the more MMOized version of Final Fantasy, and like, it was okay. Like, I enjoyed it, but this gives me hope that we're going to see good Final Fantasy games in the future, continuing.
Yeah, I'm real excited about the FF7 from being incredibly skeptical. And I mean, I'm sure I'll get into this later, but I feel like Final Fantasy 15 is not just a resurrection of Final Fantasy games. I think it is also doing stuff in the RPG storytelling space that haven't been done enough and are really interesting and feel fresh and new. I'm particularly thinking about how it handles its ensemble cast.
Well, and I also think, in addition to that, it's doing RPG combat in a different way that works. Like, they've tried to do this a couple times with offshoot games like, Lightning Returns and the Vincent Valentine game, and it never quite worked, right? Like, it didn't feel great, but the combat here feels actiony, but at the same time tactical.
It feels like Crisis Core to me, and I loved Crisis Core.
Crisis Core was a pretty good take on the action combat thing.
Yeah, it feels a lot like Crisis Core to me, and I really, really liked Crisis Core.
I mean, I started checking out of the Final Fantasy franchise when they started moving away from turn-based combat, which I know, like, no one else probably agrees with me, but...
Nope, I agree with you 100%. I thought that 10-2 was going to be the last Final Fantasy game that I enjoyed.
Yeah. And so, like, this is obviously not turn-based combat, but I've managed to ease myself into it enough, and it I don't know, it still feels manageable for me, and it still feels like Final Fantasy, but I still have mixed feelings about it, because Final Fantasy is just turn-based combat to me. But it's definitely, like, the first Final Fantasy game that has any kind of action combat that I was even willing to give much of a chance, and I've enjoyed it, so I'm glad I did.
Yeah, part of why I was so worried about was 15 was that 12 was the Final Fantasy that kind of didn't work for me and ended my love affair with the series, and that was the one where they had the action combat.
Yep.
That just never clicked for me, and I had just assumed that was a lot of the problem, but here it's working really well.
Yeah, I mean, I was afraid that, like you said, that pretty much any new modern take on Final Fantasy was going to have some kind of combat that wasn't going to work for me, and I was going to be sad. But obviously, they've found something that seems to work.
Okay.
Once upon a time, when 15 was versus 13, I remember them talking about the Kingdom Hearts team was originally working on it. I realized the Kingdom Hearts team is currently doing other things, like the next Kingdom Hearts game. So it's interesting to see how far it's come from that.
Yeah.
Well, I think Kingdom's Heart as a whole did action combat pretty well as well.
Yeah, somehow, like, I loved Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, it worked great there.
It worked fine.
I feel like this is an evolution off of Kingdom Hearts.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah, because it's that same, you're controlling the main character and the others are doing their own things with you able to, influence their actions to a degree.
Makes me also think of Symphonia games to some extent. Or Tales of, I guess, is the better one. The better example. Title. Words are hard.
Okay. I think this next one is a Kodra pick. The Witness.
Yes. So we played this for our game of the month, and this is just, it's a beautiful game. Like, I know that I can get bogged down in the details of like what it all means and whatnot. But when I just step back and like remember playing through the game itself, it's a beautifully crafted game about solving interesting puzzles. And from a visual perspective, an auditory perspective, and a puzzle solving perspective, I think it's brilliant. Like if I'm actually just taking it as a game, I think it worked very well. I love all of the expansions upon the same core principles of drawing lines on a maze and getting from the start to the finish.
I really love the art style in that game.
Yeah, the art style is so good. Like, and is very well served by the fact that it is an art style that is also trying to deliver all of these clean lines so that you can solve puzzles with the environment.
It is sometimes madness.
It is sometimes madness, but I mean, I never actually came across a puzzle that once I solved it, I felt that was kind of BS. An environmental puzzle, that is. I certainly came across some of the regular puzzles that I was like, this is kind of BS. But once you learn how to solve the puzzles, I found it very, very enjoyable and approachable, and it was just fun to play through. Very beautiful game. Like, you spend your time, you go through it, you finish, and you're happy with yourself. There's also some really, like, you can dig deeper into it if you want, but I don't think that's actually necessary to really enjoy the game.
Yeah, I almost like it better if you don't.
Yes, I find that similar to Braid, I liked the game a lot better before I tried to be completionist about it. I mean, there's not much to say. It's not like it has a very deep plot on the surface. It is a series of well-crafted puzzles that are going to take advantage of the art style to use a whole bunch of different puzzle-solving techniques. And it's very, very successful at what it's setting out to do.
So we technically have one more game on the list, and this game was one that Inky wanted to discuss, but Inky was unfortunately not able to join us this evening. However, I've played Skyrim Special Edition as well, and I have to say, like, I am a big fan of it, if for no reason other than it greatly improves the gameplay experience for Skyrim.
Which was already a great game.
It was already a great game, but like they've gone through and made the client work better. It runs better. You can Alt-Tab now. There's no weirdness like that. The baseline of the game is beautiful, and you don't need to install, as many mods to bring it to that point. Of course, everybody's going to install mods anyway, but like, I mostly just rebooted and started as a brand new character just to see what it was. And it's great. Like, it's Skyrim, and things just work better. Like, you don't need the community curated unofficial bug fix patch to fix problems. It's always going to exist. But like, yeah, it's a cleaner, better version of Skyrim, which I'm sure we've all spent hundreds of hours playing at this point.
Oh, yes.
May have been some time spent playing Skyrim in the past, yes.
Yeah, but it definitely bears mentioning. Like, I think like the part of it that is most impressive to me is the fact that it just magically showed up in Steam for me.
If you had it.
You had all the DLC for Skyrim. It just magically showed up for you.
Yeah, and it was great. Like, I installed it, and boom. This is now my new Skyrim client. And in addition to that, like, it now adds in some of the functionality that was on the client or the console ports, where much easier access to mods, no more running, Nexus mods to boot your game and get things in. Like, there's just some of the mods just work. Like, you go in there and you pick them from the list, and boom, you now have that mod. So it's like, it's a much better
integration that sort of worked before. It worked in most games.
Well, okay, but the difference being, with Steam Workshop, you installed it from the Steam client. With this, you now install it from the game client.
because the official mods are on Bethesda.net now.
Right. So that's nicer. Like, if it gives you an interface in game without having to fiddle with anything else. So that's definitely a plus. And from what I understand, it works that way on the consoles other than PlayStation, which it technically does work, but you're greatly limited in the mods you can install for whatever reason. But that brings us to a close of our Games of the Year show.
I'm sort of curious if anybody had runners-up.
A bunch of runners-up.
Yeah, like, what runners-up did we have that didn't quite make the cut, but you still thought about?
I said Pokemon Sun and Moon was the third best game in its category this year, and World of Final Fantasy would be number 2. World of Final Fantasy is definitely a bit of a trip. It's playing heavily on nostalgia for the Final Fantasy series. It is turn-based, sort of like the old ones, where you take various monsters you find in the series and either ride them around or stack them on your head and fight things.
That's so strange to me. Apparently very good. People love it.
It looked adorable.
It is adorable.
I feel like Gundam Breaker probably was somewhere just lurking outside of the games that I would have picked, just because that's a really interesting game.
What is this game? I've been watching a bunch of Gundam, and so I'm now instantly curious about this thing that you just said.
Gundam Breaker 3 is an action game for the PS4.
That isn't out here yet, I don't think.
Never going to come out here.
Yeah.
But, it is available in English. The main draw of sorts is building Gundam models and battling with them. Not that complicated, but it is incredibly fun.
Yeah, so like you kill a unit and you get parts, and then you use those parts to do things with.
The customization available is quite a lot more than I expected. Like, you can just, hey, you have this spare rocket. You can stick it on your Gundam, and now you're going to shoot a rocket.
So, I had on my short list both Firewatch and Oxenfree, which were both story games that I really enjoyed from this year. Superhot was also on there somewhere. There was a lot of good games this year.
So, on mine, I think most of my runners-up ended up getting picked by someone else anyway, but one that would have absolutely made my list if I didn't know that it was being shut down soon, and therefore made me sad and angry, was Justice Monsters 5, which, you know, is this bizarre spin-off mobile game based on Final Fantasy, like a mini game in Final Fantasy 15, and it has just devoured so much of my standing around phone poking time.
I feel like a game that I love but have no opportunity to play is Ultimate Chicken Horse. And I would have loved to have put that on the list, but, you know, for practicality, it's not something that I'm going to play that often.
Starbound did hit 1.0 this year. We played quite a bit of that during the summer when it finally actually came out.
Right, Starbound. The early access game, I keep checking to see if it's live yet, is 20XX. I imagine that'll be on my Games of 2017 list.
It comes out in 2017.
No.
So since we probably have a little bit of time, in a whole other direction,
Before you go on,
okay,
I did want to comment my runners-up. Shadow Tactics, which you've heard me gush about. It's the Ninjas game I've been wanting to play all year, and it was fantastic. And the more time I sit and think about it, the more I like Event Zero. I think that's worth playing.
That is a game I need to play.
So on the other side of the coin, what was your biggest disappointment of the year of a game that you thought you were really going to like but didn't end up liking? What was that, Tam?
The Division.
Yeah, Division's pretty high on my disappointment list just because it ended up not being a game I wanted to play. And I was so amped for it at release, and I tried so hard to keep playing it. Even I have friends that are still playing it, so like it definitely appeals to a specific crowd. I think ultimately, mechanically, the fact that it was a third-person shooter just kind of was a nail in the coffin for me.
Only for me, that's a positive.
Yeah, that was a positive for me, but man, there were a lot of other things that...
Well, and like the thing that it didn't have that Destiny has is like the guns don't feel interesting or good. They're just like all the same. Like every SMG feels like every other SMG. No Man's Sky probably is somewhere on that list too, because like I was super amped for that game.
I definitely was not, and I feel like No Man's Sky perfectly delivered on my expectations.
Well, for me, the disappointment was actually Star Ocean 5, which came out came out in the US last year, and I really really like Star Ocean 3. Didn't play Star Ocean 4, although I hear that saved me some trouble. And 5 found it very hard to actually play because for whatever reason they decided the camera should follow very closely to the ground, and therefore it went up and down with every single little bump in the ground.
Ugh.
And therefore I basically couldn't play it. It was just disorienting.
I feel like Mighty Number 9 has to be mentioned here as well.
Maybe it would have if I'd played it.
You didn't actually play it?
No.
I did.
And?
It wasn't good.
So
At all.
play it.
Because, like, I know you saved yourself some frustration.
Hey, Bell, have you heard the good news of 20XX?
20XX?
Yes, I have. A lot of it on a couple different shows.
And entirely unrelated, I picked up Mega Man Legacy during the Steam sale, and I've been having a lot of fun with that.
I'm just saying, if you want, like, I really do agree with the tweet of KJ Inafune could have just spent all of that Kickstarter money to give it to the 20XX guys to say that it was his game.
The game I wish I could put on my list as a favorite and or runner-up is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, because
It didn't come out.
the demo that was
These actually
released,
come out.
the demo that was released was amazing, but it's not due out until like at least mid 2018 at the moment. But like, if they just keep up with that demo, I'm down. Like, that was great.
Likewise, Original Sin 2 went into early access.
Yeah.
And yep, long as that game comes out, it'll probably be going on one of these lists.
Oh, hey, was Chroma Squad this year?
Chroma Squad was this
Chroma
year.
Squad was in fact this
Later
year.
That deserves an honorable mention.
That was definitely
Was just thinking that.
in my runners up.
Other games that were surprisingly disappointing for me. Satellite Rain, which I'd been watching for a while, finally played last year. I was hoping that it would be the cyberpunk stealth game that Shadow Tactics ultimately was a ninja game version of, and it just did not work. And Necropolis.
Oh, right. Yeah, Necropolis was kind of a disappointment for me, too.
Yeah, it seemed like it was going to be really cool, and then
I was really excited about the idea of like a dungeon crawly game that I could play co-op with friends, and
yeah,
I've been craving a good co-op game for quite some time now. It's hard to get everybody in one place.
I know we've talked about this a lot, or at least I've brought it up a lot, and Grace has as well, but like I feel like Diablo 3 deserves some sort of an honorable mention for its seasons, because every couple months it makes me rabidly play the game for a couple weeks and really be happy to be playing it again, and then I am perfectly fine to fade into obscurity until the next season happens.
Yeah, I mean, they're not a new thing even for 2016, but they certainly...
The 3-month schedule was.
Yeah, they standardized things a lot. Like, they got the season journey thing down, and they standardized the schedule of them, and definitely made it into a thing. But on the flip side, like, I don't know, in a way, Diablo 3 is one of my disappointments of the year, because I was expecting announcements at least of something new for it, and there's not really a lot on the horizon. So, and the anniversary content thing they added is kind of nice, but I keep feeling like maybe I wish they could spend time actually adding something viable to the game. Anyway,
it feels like a game in maintenance mode.
It is. Mostly.
Yeah. Okay, well, we should probably wrap things up unless somebody else has additional comments that they want to add.
Not that I can think of offhand.
You should seriously give Digimon Story Cybersleep a try.
I never expected to say this about Digimon, but that sounds like something I would be interested in. Too bad it's not on the system that I own.
Don't you own a PS4?
I do not.
We need to convert Thale into the cult of PS4?
Remember, I got the Xbox One because that's where all my Rock Band lived.
Yeah, I know. I also have an Xbox One, but it sees a lot less playtime than my PS4. Well, that was another year of our game picks that we never quite coalesce into an actual game of the year. But I like it better this way. So hopefully you enjoyed the show and will join us the actual next week after this for, another show and things get back to normal. And that show will probably be the Game of the Year show?
Game of the month.
Yeah, Game of the Month show.
When we
Danganronpa.
Yes.
Danganronpa. Trigger Happy Havoc. This will be a weird one, folks.
It's definitely going to be a thing.
Yep.
Yes, it will.
Anyway, hopefully you had a good time, and we will see you later. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
See you.
Good night.